Welcome to the debate and to this edition of QIMA's Supply Chain Soundbites. Today we're trying to make sense of the very contradictory ESG landscape here in early 2026. The real question is this: is the regulatory wave retreating after all the delays last year, or is it actually intensifying, just in a different way, through trade barriers? I'm arguing that this so-called retreat is, well, it's an illusion. The reporting deadlines might shift, but the core machinery, carbon and circularity, is locking in hard.
And I'm going to take the opposing view. I think 2026 is starting on the back of frankly, a collapse in political will. To me, the framework proved it's unstable, it's fragmented, and companies preparing for the wrong rules are making a pretty serious strategic error.
Okay, but let's look at the operational reality. I'll grant you, the headline regulations, the paperwork, that's slowed down. But look at the hardware. As we start 2026, the EU's Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation, the PPWR, it's still moving ahead. We're seeing the first digital product passports, or DPPs, for steel and iron. The infrastructure is being built, regardless of the political noise.
But you can't just ignore that political signal. 2025 was the year of stop the clock. We saw a 2-year delay on the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the CSRD, and a 90% reduction in the scope of companies that even have to report. Then, on top of that, the EU Deforestation Regulation, the EUDR, was pushed all the way to late 2026. If I'm a chief sustainability officer, doubling down on compliance for laws that keep getting watered down just looks like bad business.
See, I think you're looking at the wrong map. You're focused on reporting deadlines while I'm looking at market access. Yes, the European Due Diligence Directive, the CSDDD, it raised its thresholds to exempt smaller companies. But the actual trade barriers at the border, those didn't go anywhere. Look at the U.S. Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, the UFLPA. They just added high-priority sectors like steel and aluminum.
Okay, but even Germany suspended its own supply chain act, the LKSG, until the European directive catches up. I mean, that's the engine of Europe hitting the brakes. When a major economy pauses reporting, it suggests the whole system is overwhelmed and probably unenforceable.
Unenforceable on paper, maybe, but not at the port. If you pause your supply chain mapping because the German law is on hold, well, you're going to run right into the wall of the EU Forced Labor Database, which is launching this June. The reporting might be delayed, sure, but if your goods get seized at customs because you can't prove their origin, the reporting deadline becomes totally irrelevant. Compliance has in effect merged with logistics.
Let's talk about the cost of that logistics, though. You brought up circularity. I don't see a cohesive strategy there. I see fragmentation. We have a right to repair mess, a chaotic patchwork. Belgium has repair indices, New Zealand has new spare parts laws, and the US has all these different state laws. It's almost impossible to build a global strategy when California and the EU don't even have the same definitions for extended producer responsibility.
The complexity doesn't negate the cost, though. The financial liabilities are already live. France has a fast fashion parcel tax, up to €4 an item. And more importantly, the EU is getting rid of the de minimis exemption in July. So that loophole for duty-free small shipments that fueled the rise of these direct-to-consumer giants, it's gone. These aren't, theoretical risks. They're immediate hits to the P&L.
The taxes are real, I'll grant you that. But let's look at carbon and data. You mentioned digital product passports. Honestly, I'm highly skeptical of the tech readiness. China is proposing its own DPP system. The UK is working on its own carbon border adjustment mechanism. We are heading for a compliance nightmare where companies have to duplicate all this data for every single region.
That is exactly my point. The data is the common denominator here. The EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, the updates in 2026 bring in a 50-ton threshold. Data is the new currency. Without deep traceability, you can't meet DPP requirements, and you can't handle CBAM. Whether it's for the UK, the EU, or China, you can't sell if you don't know your supply chain.
But that just leads to paralysis. My view is still that 2026 requires extreme caution. This fragmentation means companies risk wasting a ton of resources building systems for standards that might just change again next year.
And I'll maintain that while the timelines shift, the actual requirement for deep supply chain data is permanent. The cost of not knowing, of opacity, is rising through taxes and border seizures, and it doesn't matter which reporting framework wins out in the end.
Okay, I think we can agree on the fundamental shift, though. Compliance isn't just about filling out a form anymore, it's about your very license to operate.
Absolutely. So let's leave our listeners with a few practical steps for 2026. First, and this is immediate, you have to map your supply chains down to the raw material. It's the only defense against forced labor bans and carbon taxes.
Second, digitize. You just cannot handle digital product passports with spreadsheets. Third, focus on circular design. Apply the 5 R's, refuse, reduce, reuse, repurpose, recycle, start now to lower those future EPR fees.
And finally, break down the internal silos. Procurement, legal, and sustainability. They need to function as a single unit to stop duplicating work.
And for those feeling the weight of all this fragmentation, companies like QIMA help businesses manage these exact risks. They can handle supply chain mapping, self-assessment questionnaires, traceability audits. You don't have to build it all from scratch.
Exactly. They also cover everything from supplier training and ESG risk dashboards to lab testing and even full life cycle assessments. That's it for this edition of QIMA's Supply Chain Soundbites. Thank you for listening.